again. And we are live. And just to make sure, if someone will post and say, yes, we can see you, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Comments are refreshing. Looks like shift to good again. Can you see us?
Yes, we're good to go.
And very good. Thank you. Sorry about the delay. Welcome to the Wednesday webinar. And I want to, I'm so excited about this webinar. Our guest is Forrest Benedict, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's also a sexual addiction treatment provider, lives in Northern California. And if you don't mind, I want to read the intro because I want to make sure that the viewers and the listeners are able to, are able to have contact with you, Forrest. You've got some things to offer our Fortify students, and I know you've referred some of your clients over to Fortify, but addiction recovery, what I love about what I have read in your book, you've been there, you've done that, you know this space, both as an addict and now as a licensed marriage and family therapist. You are also the program coordinator of the Sexual Addiction Treatment Provider Certification Program at Mid-America Nazarene, where you also teach. You currently lead 6 active therapy groups with LifeStar. Some of our people are very familiar with LifeStar. You work with both males and females. You're currently co-facilitating recovery intensives with LifeStar Sacramento, and LifeStar Sacramento has also been a host of your Life After Lust workshop as well. You have created helpful recovery-related content through your Life After Lust blog and Life After Lust newsletter and blog. You're the founder of the Anti-Pornography Movement Facebook group, and you're a leading voice, yes you are, of opposing pornography. You write and you speak about protecting children from pornography, and you are now, as of Forrest, last Friday, you are launching your online private practice, working with both males and females and couples as well. You are married and you are the proud father of boys. Mm-hmm. And just to begin, I want to give our members your email address. Some are going to want to contact you. That email address is Forrest with one R, Forest, at forrestbenedict.com. And I'll review that again when we conclude. Forrest, I told you yesterday, we had a chance to get together yesterday. I think I've read everything out there that has to do with recovery. Mm-hmm. I couldn't put your book down. Life After Lust. Stories and strategies for sex and porn addiction recovery. And that's just what that book is. So many of us, Forrest, say, is there life after my addiction? And I think your book helps to validate all of that there is. So good to have you here. Welcome to Fortify Webinar.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much.
I've been a fan of drugs for many years, and Fortify as well. And so I couldn't be happier to join you and offer some insight to those of you that are here.
Thank you. Yes, and my frustration is in my group. Well, guys will invariably ask in our support groups, what is the single most important thing that we should know about recovery? And I think I've come up with about 72 of them. I want to talk about every chapter in your book. We can't do that in 60 minutes. And so I know you've carved out some things that you would like to address. Mm-hmm. We're going to have some questions from our viewers. I've also asked some of my group members to ask some questions. And if we have time, I hope we can fit those in. But I love the 3 M's. I love the mission, the mastery. The first one is mindset. The mindset, the mastery, and the mission. I love how you've simplified where am I going in recovery. But I'd like you to take over for us. Let's go ahead and talk on whatever you feel comfortable talking about. We've got an hour. Let's squeeze as much juice out of this thing as we can in the next hour.
All right. Yeah, definitely. In the book, I definitely tried to organize some of the main pieces of recovery that I've seen be helpful for other people as well as myself. So I have 19 essential mindsets, really small amount, 34 skills to master, and 15 missions to accomplish. So it's a lot, but it's a lifetime. It's not that we have to learn all this overnight just to achieve any success. And so I just wanted to focus on a few that I think are generally the things that people don't do well in early recovery, but they probably make a significant difference. And they're things that aren't really talked about too much. So that's kind of a big deal.
I love that. And again, you and I have just gotten acquainted this last week. And I told you that one of my absolute areas is mindset. And I know I use in my groups and also in one-on-one work, I bought this little piece of dog do on Amazon a few years ago. And I did it because it reminds me and allows me also when I work with people, say how important mindset is. I walked around for years saying I'm a piece of crap. Mm-hmm. And just the act of saying it and thinking it just crushed me. And self-esteem, self-worth, there is no self-worth when this is my theme of my belief about myself. And so I was so thrilled that, you started with mindset and then mastery, talking about the work of recovery. Where would you like to go? Where would you like to start as we, I think you had wanted to talk a little bit about self-care. And I put a quote, with no self-care, there's no long-term recovery.
And I've talked about that a lot. And, I kind of based some of this on the work of Kelly McGonigal, who talks about the science, the neuroscience behind self-care. And so the thing about pornography addiction specifically is it has a negative impact on the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that gives us self-control. So when we look at recovery, to me, it makes sense to stop doing the thing that's hurting your brain. But it also makes sense to do things that will strengthen your brain, that'll give you more self-control. And so, I talk about that in my book, and it's just so essential. It's kind of accepting that part of recovery is really a lifestyle change. It's really changing how you relate to your body and to yourself and to your worth and everything. And so this piece on self-care, I recommend taking these categories really seriously. Sleep is huge. I know for me, if I do not sleep, my self-control goes down the drain, and that's very common for many people. But the thing about it is it actually affects the part of the brain that gives us self-control if we're not getting enough sleep. So that may seem like, well, it's a no-brainer, right? It affects the brain. And then exercise is another thing that strengthens self-control in the brain. Mindful breathing. This is one thing that's this is a hack. I mean, mindfulness affects the brain in so many positive ways, and it also helps with mood. So it's this mindful breathing practice that I recommend to clients is usually the one that they totally ignore, but it's probably the one that has the most science to back it up, is actually strengthening self-control. So, it's just this mindful breathing exercise, 5 to 10 minutes of focusing on your breath and or slowing down your breath to 6 breaths per minute. And it strengthens self-control. And then the last one I focus on that I don't think people really think about too much is actually diet. And I'm not a nutritionist or anything, but I have studied how, large spikes in blood sugar affect self-control. And so when we're, cramming our bodies with all this sugar, it actually will impact our self-control that will affect other areas of our life, including our addiction and other things that we may not want to be so impulsive with. So those, and the other thing too, I find that in working with addicts, those of us that struggle in this area, is we tend to, like, if you were to take away pornography or something, some sexual acting out behavior, I found that what we tend to choose as kind of like our backup addiction is sugar or food. It's not uncommon for people to put on weight in the beginning because it's like they switched addictions. They didn't learn how to take care of themselves. They just learned how to medicate in a new way. So I think that's pretty important.
You just touched on, if not answered.
Well, I guess we're done.
Yeah, I'd say we're over. Last night in the Tuesday night group, I asked a couple of members if they had questions they wanted to ask you. And interesting that even though, like you said, diet, exercise, sleep, those are no-brainers on the one hand, but we don't think about their importance, I don't think, enough. And, well, Wanjo is his screen name. Wanjo down in Lima asked me if I would ask you or discuss with you this idea of I come home tired and I've been practicing mindfulness, but gosh darn it, 11 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock at night, he said it seems to transition into mindlessness rather than mindfulness. And I've wondered if that being tired, worn out, somehow compromises our, and I don't want to call it willpower, but do we sort of lose our energy to combat and to fight in those hours? And is it possible that that's a result of not getting enough rest?
In that situation, there's nothing that's going to work except sleep. Why not give yourself what your body needs in that moment? That's a big part of recovery, is tuning into my body, figuring out what I need. And, we're masters of self-neglect. We really do not know how to take care of ourselves. We're focused on so many other things besides learning to love and take care of ourselves. And we don't realize that it has a profound impact on our ability to recover. And not only that, but even just to feel better, like getting a food addiction or a video game addiction or just binging on Netflix, that might feel a little bit better than watching porn, but it really doesn't heal us and it really doesn't help us. It just makes us maybe get through one more day, maybe.
Short-term gain, long-term pain. You use a term in your book that I have fallen in love with, the evil genius. We talk about different parts of the brain in another program that many of us at Fortify are familiar with. We were introduced to characters called the director, the responder, the planner, the list keeper. And when we give these anthropomorphic bodily features and create these, but the evil genius, I love it. The evil genius is the one that's telling me, hey, let's do self-care. Yeah, you're tired. Let's go ahead and look at the porn. Let's go in some masturbation. Let's do it between midnight and 3 in the morning. So we do a 3-hour binge. I just lost my chance to get the sleep necessary to gain the strength and the energy and the sense of well-being that would then allow me to come home the next night at 11 and say, I don't do this. I'm going to bed. I'm going to get my rest. It's genius is such an imposter. Tell us about the evil genius, by the way.
What's interesting is the evil genius, I think it really is part of us that wants to take care of us, wants to, meet our needs in its way, and we've found that that's actually a pretty self-destructive strategy. But when we neglect our self-care, that evil genius really comes, like, that's a sign, or that's a result of neglecting our self-care often, is that our evil genius gets really loud, like I talk about in the book a couple places, like when I'm low on sleep myself, I'm vulnerable, it's, even though I've been in recovery long-term, it's not like we become immune and we can just go back into neglecting ourselves,
You said, again, a day without self-care. Again, I think I'm doing self-care, again, on a short-term, inappropriate basis, but I'm doing self-care when I'm involved in, man, I got to get through the day. I won't be able to go to sleep tonight unless I look at porn and masturbate. That's very common. A day without the real self-care is a day of self-neglect. And that really jumped out at me. Very simple, one sentence. I love that.
I guess this would be something really important for everybody that's struggling, is that it's very difficult to just focus on that moment of temptation. You really have to build this up as a lifestyle, that you're preparing for that temptation that's going to hit you hard in a week today. Mark Laser says you prepare for when you're weak, when you're strong. It's like you're preparing for battle, and part of that is a daily routine. That's self-care, but there's other things that can help with that. Obviously, it's not just that, but I think if people took that more seriously, they would find a lot more victory.
I hope I'm not jumping ahead. And as you speak, I'm just seeing chapter.
Again. Yeah, I'm happy
highlighted in your book. I want the members to know this will not be our only time. There are some guests we know are coming back, and you're going to be one of them for us. I had mentioned that you had sort of addressed two questions that some group members of mine had asked. One was this idea of, mindlessness, exhaustion, being tired, and sort of this feeling like, I can't do anything. I'm so tired. But you also talked about the cross addiction, which was another question one of the members asked. And I have fallen prey to substitute addiction. And once porn and masturbation as an unwanted behavior in my life was finally gone on a lasting level, not on just an occasional level, I seemed to jump over to Tillamook extra sharp cheddar cheese, and and I joke, but I have been known to put mayonnaise on a sandwich, and when I'm done putting the mayo on, rather than put the spoon back in the sink to be washed, I'll lick the spoon with the mayonnaise. To me, that's a substitute addiction. Food is such a feel good, and finding replacements for porn addiction has been a challenge, and being aware that there are these behaviors. Can you talk about a little more about substitute addiction? How easy it is to find substitute addictions?
In my book, I quoted Rob Weiss, who talked about it's like playing whack-a-mole. It's like you hit one down and then another one comes up, and it's just not effective. It's not good recovery. It's not really going to help you heal long term. So that's why we have to learn self-care. Um, but the other piece, which I think can really get in our way, if there, obviously there's a lot to this. I was going to get to this at the end, but part of it too is like replacing your addiction with a life well lived, with purpose and with things that are fun and enjoyable. Like there's pleasure, out there and not just in our brains and through pornography. So part of that is really replacing um, the addiction with a life well lived. And but part of that though, you don't have the potential. You can't really grasp while you're in the addiction. We go into self hate and we go into not seeing our value and our worth and our contribution to the world. We just don't see that when we're stuck in this addiction world. And so it's just so essential that we get free and pursue that life after lust. I mean, that's, and fight the new drugs awesome with that. Like it's all about, let's fight for love. Let's live this life. Let's get free.
Sometimes I think I don't deserve that. I've hurt so many people. I've disappointed myself and others. And one of your chapters where you talked about, and maybe that's where you're sort of headed, this idea of relax. I like forgiveness. Man, I forgive everybody around me, but boy, when it comes to me, forgiveness, I'm not quite deserving of that. That's how
Yeah.
I feel about relaxation and playing. I just haven't quite earned the right to relax and pray. I need to stay focused on
Yeah.
my amends to other people and my, trying to make things right. I don't relax. And people that know me here, they're looking at me here in the office. They know
Yeah.
I don't relax like I ought to. My relaxation is my work. And sometimes I feel like I'm cheating at
Yeah.
recovery if I
Well,
go fly fishing.
I often say that if we don't invest in self care, we're going to waste time in addiction. You know, like I mean, you just said you use work to relax, which to me is like, oh, there's another addiction, work, staying busy, yeah, it's going to be, I mean, recovery is very difficult. And, it may seem, uh, it's kind of ironic because it's like self love really is the key, and we think that self indulgence is self love, but it's not. It's really a form of self abuse, really. But it's letting yourself go fishing or letting yourself eat healthy. Um, it's very difficult to learn to treat ourselves that way when we pretty much hate ourselves for things that we've been doing. We have so much self-hate, and that does fit in with the second point. Is I've studied a lot of on self-compassion, and there's a lot of science that backs it up. Like it is one of the most effective strategies for healing from trauma and depression, and actually it affects self-control. So that was what I wanted to get to next. Is like we really have to change our relationship with ourselves. And if we think, I mean, when I was in early recovery, or actually I'd say before recovery, I would make $100 bets with my friends, like, let's see who can not use porn. And then it was like a self-punishment thing if we whoever lost the bet, right? Or I even shaved my head. I threw my VCR, which some people won't know what that is, but I like hammered it, or like self punishment really is not going to help us in any way. In fact, it'll make us more wanting to act out, because self punishment raises our cortisol levels in our body. It's a form of stress, and it really is a way to guarantee that we will act out again, and it'll probably be worse when we do.
John Jay, if you can read his comments.
Yeah, I've seen some of those.
I can't read all the comments. We need to set up a meditation cushion and a singing bowl for you in the corner of your office.
You might receive some of those in the mail.
It's a good suggestion. And I just touching on group, and again, I don't want to divert from where we're headed, but one of the reasons I loved support groups is it's a place to become accountable. And we are not a therapy group. We're not a formal therapy group. However, there are therapeutic benefits that are powerful in support groups. But one of the things I like is being held accountable. And when we check in, and I will tell you that over the last, I've been doing groups now for 4 or 5 years, and invariably someone will say, if I have to call in sick, and then I show up the next week, or I'm talking about in a check-in about my diet, Vinny, how can you help people really if you're stuffing your face full of mayonnaise and Tillamook sharp cheddar cheese, and if you're not relaxing, you're not helping yourself, you're not helping your health, and we'll get you for a shorter period of time than if you would relax and have self-compassion. All of those things leading to a healthier Vinny and a healthier us. But again, sometimes just forget. That's why I'm so grateful you made such an emphasis in your book. And again, the book is Life After Lust. It's on Amazon. It's in Kindle edition. It's in a paperback edition. And is it available in Audible for those of us? Good, very good. Just one of the best reads. Let's keep going.
I'll just add to kind of what I think you were starting to say there is the importance of groups. And, I wasn't planning to talk too much about that, but I think the Fortify community really does have a huge advantage because nobody really does heal from this alone. Like we could easily do a whole another episode just on healing through connection, because I'm talking a lot about self-love and self-care and self-compassion, but sometimes we really need to receive compassion from another person before we can even consider giving it to ourselves. So there is a ton of healing in groups and in accountability. And I have been recommending Fortify for years. I think it's amazing what you guys are doing there.
Can we get you to slip in a group?
I would love to. Yeah.
One of these days. Thank you for that. And didn't intend to plug groups. But on the other hand, one of the reasons I'm the director of Fortify Groups is my passion for groups. Groups played such a huge role in finding lasting change. And, one of the simplest things you just touched on, my story, when I have guys introduce themselves in group, I go, oh, there's my story again. It's not identical, but it's pretty darn close. And just having that relief of knowing I'm not just one guy out of 7 billion that is struggling. I'm one of many. And we do have, sort of a camaraderie and a sense of belonging and a sense of that word you used, connection. I call group a turbocharger. I use that expression all the time. I magnify, I enlarge, I accelerate my progress in recovery by participating in a group. And every guy that I've dealt with in group over the last 4 or 5 years that's joined group that was scared, they were afraid, somebody might know me. I really don't know if I want to share after the first group, they're going, this was pretty good. I'm with myself, only 6, 7, 8, 12 other people.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful experience.
The way I put it in my book is what you fear most will heal you. It's like nobody at first wants to be a part of a group, but then they realize, wow, this is awesome. This is powerful. There's strength in numbers, it's not something you can really do. And it's not quite as fun to do it alone anyways. John had a question that that was about, actually practicing the
Huh?
self-compassion. And that is really what I was going to get into
Huh?
when I introduced self-compassion.
Yes.
And so in my book, I always remember it's on page 123. It's easy to remember in the paperback version, but I call it the failure response worksheet. It's basically like a way to respond to any slip or relapse or any failure, really, that helps you like evaluate what triggered you and what happened. But then it also allows you to practice what's called a self-compassion break. So you basically practice this time of kind of reassuring yourself, that it's going to be okay, that this is a moment of suffering, that you're going to be okay. And this is always strange to people in the beginning, but it's kind of ironic because part of self-compassion is actually putting your hands over your heart and feeling the warmth of your hands. And I find that people
Ah,
find that really awkward. Like, and I joke about it too, good, because it's like I say, well, it's awkward to touch ourselves in a nurturing way, but we have no problem touching ourselves in a sexual way. So it's like, but the nurturing, the self compassion actually increases oxytocin, which helps us feel safe and secure. So there's something chemically that actually changes when we relate to ourselves with self compassion. Um, and so I've done that in many situations, driving down the road, doing this, when I'm feeling the tension in my jaw, or if I get nervous leading a group, I'll kind of grab my hand and do this as a form of self compassion, and it really is a powerful way to deal with difficult emotion too. But specifically when we failed, if we can just learn to, not to justify it, but to just say, hey, you're human, let's get back up, let's get in the game, let's not waste time, whacking ourselves over the head for this. There's no, it makes it worse.
I know that the experience I've had working with spouses in a spouses group and then on a one-on-one basis. I made the suggestion a few years ago that I called it. I did a podcast called "The Miracle of a Slip." While some of those of us struggling with unwanted behaviors appreciated that, the spouses were, don't you dare tell my spouse that when he slips or relapses, it's a miracle. And of course, understanding the context helped clarify it. But I know my first reaction to a slip years ago, before I found lasting change, was there I was. Yeah, you see,
Yeah.
I can't stop. I'm just a piece of garbage. That immediately was almost like step one of my next slip and relapse was to, you looked at the porn, you self-gratified, and you had that moment of clarity. Oh my gosh, what did I do? Oh, I promise I'll never do this again. I'm such a loser. That started and put me back into hearing the call of what you referred to as, I love this, the megaphone of
Yeah. Yeah.
misery sounds.
Yeah. It's as if we don't have enough
Uh,
consequences, from our
why,
life. We got to add to it with how much we beat ourselves up, right?
so the self-compassion in me is like a critical. Guys ask us all the time. I know you get it. What do I do after I've slipped? I've lost everything. Life is over as I know it. Wrong. I just loved watching you just do that. That I begin with sort of maybe sitting in that emotion, but analyzing and looking at what just happened. You have this great chapter on what's some of the work I can do,
Mm-hmm.
and it's under mastery. What's some of the work I can do to deal with a slip or a
Mm-hmm.
relapse? Some people call it a failure. What do I do when that
Yeah.
happens?
Well,
What are some
I mean, we
practical
have
things?
to figure out what went wrong, we have to like evaluate it, like look at, what triggered me, how did I make myself vulnerable to this? we have to understand it if we're going to change it in the future. And that's one thing I present in my book that isn't talked about too much. Actually, it's kind of contrary to what a lot of people say about addiction. And I really believe that permanent sobriety is always possible. And so I say that because for me in early recovery, I had it helped me so much to believe that this is over, that I need to fight this with everything I got, that I'm going to do the stuff they're telling me to do because, I'm taking responsibility for this. And so, if we're going to have that mindset, and, I know I'm not, I'm not trying to shame people at all if they slip, it is something we learn from, but then how do we, rise up and say, okay, I'm not going to let it take me down in that way again. It's like your person that, comes home at night and doesn't, knows the mindful breathing isn't doing anything for him. It's like, okay, you know what? When I come home from work, I'm not turning on the computer. I'm actually calling my accountability partner the second I reach my house, and I'm going to check in with him or her and figure out, you know, my plan to get in bed and read a book and go to sleep. It's like setting ourselves up for victory next time, not not using it, um, not just not staying in that place of, well, it's probably going to happen again. It's just a different mindset, like we talked about mindset. It's really um, raising our level of intentionality of uh, how do we not find ourselves down the same old path.
There's an idea that you shared in the book, and I don't know. I had the privilege of working in an alcohol and drug program 18 years ago, where we had this concept of we would ask those that were in the group, so tell me some of your stated values, some of the things you value most, or that you say you value most. And, invariably it would be things like, family,
Mm-hmm.
God, freedom. And then we would come back and say, now, what are some of the values that your behavior
Yeah.
suggests that you value most? And we would often find that here were the stated values, here were the actual values, or the ones that my behavior proved were, or at least suggested were my values. And
Yeah.
they weren't
Yeah.
congruent, they were apart. You talk about this idea
Yeah.
of alignment in your book. And I haven't seen that a lot. And I think it's a huge component of finding freedom. Can you talk about
Yeah. No,
alignment?
I think that, I mean, I know for me, when I was active in my addiction, it was completely against my values, like I believed it was wrong, but I was still doing it. And so I see this as a big part of recovery, as we're becoming intimately connected with ourselves, and we're discovering who we are. We're discovering what our values are. And I actually got this quote from my book I was going to read. As we grow in our recovery, we learn who we are, and we gain the courage to live that out. No longer are we bound by secrecy, constantly trying to cover up choices that cause us shame. In recovery, we learn to live with integrity. We are the same person in the dark that we are in the light. So I mean, that's what we want. I mean, isn't that what we're after? It's not just stopping a behavior. It's like, the confidence that comes from being aligned, having that integrity, feeling like, okay, I am on the inside who I want to be, or there's a connection between what's showing on the outside and who I am on the inside.
Someone once said adversity introduces a man to himself, And you've also suggested that only by becoming aware of some of those
Mhm.
things that lead up to a slip or a relapse, well, only by becoming aware of those do I really have the capacity to intervene and to change those. Um, I wanted to I wanted to tie in to see if I can. Well, let me jump to, and I hope this isn't too heavy for some of our users, but I still love what
Oh,
I
yeah.
read about the term wake up call. When you work with drug and alcohol addicts, alcoholics and drug addicts, we talk about rock bottom, and I was addicted
Mhm.
to prescription drugs for almost 20 years. So I also know sort of that arena. But when you talk about rock bottom, especially
Uh-huh.
now with what is called the opioid crisis, and that's what my addiction was to painkillers. The rock bottom is often
Mhm.
reading someone's obituary in the paper. Uh, and it's like, I
Yeah.
don't want to wait till I hit rock bottom
Yeah.
in recovery. Talk
This
about
one's
that for us.
is definitely informed by my own experience, especially with having an alcoholic father that never, I mean, to him, there was no rock bottom. It got as bad as it could get, and then it got worse, and then it never got better. So um, I, I don't think I believe in rock bottom, but in a sense, I presented in the wake up call chapter that we can choose our rock bottom. That we can, that somebody could take this interview that we have right now and use this as their wake up call that helps them change their life. Or it could be somebody else who, just filed for divorce and that becomes their wake up call. Or someone that, has porn induced erectile dysfunction and they're like, no, this is my wake up call. So we can either watch other people and see how this is destroying their lives, and that can wake us up, or we can wait for the consequences to come in our own lives. Um, and it's not that we, know how to get free all of a sudden just because we're awake, but it's like, where do I get to that point of I'm going to do whatever it takes now? you know, this is game on, and then we do all those other things that help us sustain that. And it's certainly not going to be perfect, but it's like, let's pursue this new vision. And actually, as I was preparing for this, I don't know if I got this from someone else or I made it up, but in the addiction, we're like masters of fantasy. We're stuck in this fantasy world, and in recovery, we use those same powers to create vision. So, it goes from fantasy to vision. What is the impact that we're going to make in the world? And imagine that and pursue that and achieve that, really. I mean, if you guys could see me, 20 years ago, I mean, I was the shyest, most anxious guy you could imagine. Honestly, I would never do anything like this. Especially, and I loved writing my whole life, but to actually put this in a book, I mean, to me, that was kind of, I see it as modeling life after lust. It's what are the things you're passionate about? If it's being a writer, or if it's, being a teacher, or like, that's the thing is, I think there's so much potential in each of us to really change and gift and um, help the world and ourselves. And so we really can't do that when we're stuck in addiction. So to me, that's, and just a little plug for the new Fight the New Drug documentary. Everybody's got to see that, because
Oh yeah,
they're about that too. Like, do you have plans for your life? Well, get free, because the world needs you to fulfill those plans. We all need that. There's something you have to offer that the world needs and that the world will never get if you're stuck in your addiction. But not just you, but the life that you can experience free, um, is, try to engage yourself in imagining that, because actually connecting with our future self increases our self-control and really does um, help us move forward.
So we got to raise the white flag. And again, you and I think, are very visual guys. We love fantasy. I love metaphors. I love object lessons. They help me remember so many things in recovery. But to me, yeah, it's raising the white flag of surrender. It's saying the words "enough is enough." One of the great videos that I loved when the new Fortify came out 3 years ago was the opening video of, really the importance of this new moment. And it's not about the moment 5 minutes ago or 5 days or 5 years. It's about this moment. How can I bring a more business-like, if you will, a business-like approach, a greater sense of urgency? Do I have to wait until that megaphone of misery sounds again, reminding me that, another slip, another relapse, I've gone deeper than I've gone? How can I do that, Forrest?
How to remind yourself of how to avoid the megaphone of misery?
Yeah, because I have a belief. Group members are tired of hearing me say this to them or posting on the forum. I feel for myself. People say, "Well, how have you been able to maintain recovery for so long?" I do enough daily to stay deeply interested in the topic of recovery, be it daily self-care, self-compassion, forgiveness, finding ways to relax, expanding out. I haven't been able to do them all at once, but I've tried to focus on what could I really use or benefit from the most now. And there's an urgency to it, and it works. How do I sustain that
a couple
interest?
of things. When I was early in recovery, because I was not married, so I did not have like the wounding of my wife to motivate me. But what I did, because I actually think that those of us that are single or were single have it harder. It's actually harder to motivate ourselves because we don't see as many of the consequences right in front of us. So one thing that I did on a daily basis was I read a list of all of the reasons, all the benefits of getting free, and another list of all of the potential consequences if I didn't get free. And I probably read that every day for the first 6 months. And what it did was it got me out of denial. It's so easy to wake up and think, oh, I don't have an addiction. This isn't a big deal. I don't feel like I want to look at porn, but it kind of wakes us up and we have to realize, no, this is a big deal. I do need to fight this. It's not a small thing. And then the other thing is, and there's some science to back this up too, is like I talked about, that connection with our future self. And you can actually write yourself a letter from your future self 20 years in the future, telling you why it was so meaningful that you got free and how it impacted them in the future. And keep it positive. Don't be like, you're a piece of crap or whatever. But that's actually been shown, that type of letter writing exercise, and there's a visualization too that can be used. But that actually can be powerfully effective, because we really realize, wow, what I'm doing now does affect my future. There is a future to be created, that won't happen unless I connect with that vision. So that can be really powerful too.
I know in my own recovery years ago, I did an assignment called the Vision Board. And that's exactly what I related to when I read that chapter in your book. I don't mind admitting that I'm an Oprah. When she had her show, I was an Oprah fan. And one of her episodes was, you are the creator of your own happiness. I thought, really? I'm the creator? And this assignment I found to be beautiful in your book that I think can promote getting from, bridging that gap between where I am today, where I want to be tomorrow. It's a beautiful assignment. And encourage people to get the book, read some of these great homework assignments. They all fit in beautifully with Fortify's Battle Tracker, the Fortify platform. This is a very, very compatible relationship between Life After Lust and what we suggest in Fortify training. We're getting close, Forrest. I want to see we can squeeze in maybe one or two more questions. And I want to ask you one question I asked in an interview a few years ago to a therapist, one of the founders of a particular recovery program. And I said, in 5 minutes, if you could only tell your clients and those listeners, what is the single most important thing you could recommend they do? And he gave his answer. With 2 or 3 minutes to go, after I ask a question or two, I just want you to be thinking, what would you tell our members, our viewers today, after all of the things we'd say? What would you single out as something to pay attention to? And while you're sort of thinking of that at the same time, I want to come back to a question one of the group members asked last night. He struggles with shame. And not all of us have access to a therapist, but he asked the question, can therapy and counseling help me, and how can it help me overcome shame and guilt in my life?
Well, I don't think everybody needs to work with a therapist necessarily. But those of us, myself included, that have trauma or that have, some serious depression or other mental health issue, working with a therapist can really help with those things. And actually, they're often necessary. So, but some of the shame that we deal with on a regular basis is from, how we have behaved, right? The things that we've done out of alignment, that we are not happy that we've done. But then some shame is actually a result of our childhood. It's growing up in a really shaming environment, or, with parents that unfortunately never learned how to value themselves, from their own upbringing. And so they didn't value us. And so some of us just go through our lives just feeling this shame. I call it a shame-based identity. It's like wrapped up in our value, our sense of worth is so low just because we've been treated that way. And so, I think that therapy can help with that. And so, I'm just starting up some online therapy groups here in California, and there's other things available, LifeStar and lots of other resources out there.
Again, the email address, if any of you would like to contact or ask a question, Forrest has said, I'm happy to answer questions. The email address is Forrest with one R at forrestbenedict.com. I was about to say Forrest 1R Benedict, but I think they get right. The first Forrest is also the same as. Please feel free. The book is Life After Lust. It's remarkable. It's really one of the very best reads. I won't go through the titles of what I've read over the last 25 years. It's a must-have on your recovery bookshelf. Forrest, how do you want to leave? What message do you? Can we slip in this last question? I've learned that burnout is a real thing in recovery. It really happens. I'm tired. I've been working so hard at it, especially for those of us that also work in the field of anti-porn sex exploitation. As a recovering addict and as one that works in this field as a therapist, what do you do to avoid
I've
burnout?
definitely experienced burnout. Actually, after writing this book, I was doing so much speaking and, all this 8 groups a week, just all this stuff. And it did lead to a burnout. And so I'm sure you've heard this before, but we really need to do tons of self-care and honestly, like take a break from this stuff. Like this is heavy stuff. Especially when you get into the anti-porn stuff and you think about sex trafficking and you think about just all the darkness in the world. Like we need to be, I'd say, flooding ourselves with sources of light, with good things, with beautiful things, with vacations, with things that aren't just about this topic, and that will actually, I think, prepare us more to fight when we're ready to get back in the game, Sleep. Yeah, sleep.
Sleep,
Yeah.
rest. Reminds me, we push ourselves and push ourselves, and sometimes there's nothing left. There's nothing left. I don't know how well our fight
Yeah, we're not very
proceeds
effective when
from
we're
there.
burned out.
I want to talk about intimacy. I want to talk about sense of urgency more. I want to talk about the letter to myself, my future me. You have wonderful ideas. I don't know how to thank you for us. And again, I hope this will be the first of more podcasts from you. And I know the feedback. I sense the feedback already from some of the questions. That this has been a very positive experience. Selfishly,
I would
it has
actually
been for
love
me.
to be back anytime. I mean, this is probably my favorite audience, my favorite platform. I mean, I feel like, let's change the world together, and if the things that I know and have learned can help, all of you, then I'm delighted to be a part of that.
There is, for those that aren't sure, there is life after lust. We may not always know precisely what that looks like in the moment, but if we'll just do enough so that we can put our little toe in that shallow end of the recovery pool, hopefully there's enough validation to say, let's go a little deeper into this. I tell my clients, if you knew how great recovery really was, you would put your track shoes on and sprint to get there. The only problem with that phrase is when you say there, it makes it sound like it's a place. You will pass beautiful milestones on and on and on. And as someone once said, it just gets better from here. And then it gets better from there and there and there. Your book has inspired me to do another self-examination on me and my own recovery. And I got new ideas to share with those I work with. Hope I can plagiarize like crazy from your book.
But
that's right.
And you asked, actually, I don't think I gave a final, message. So my message is really simple, and it's just that you are worth it. Think about that.
Yeah. If I could grab hold of that thought and really internalize it, it reignites. If it's been put out, hope is ignited. And I think hope is a very key driver in this whole process, because often we feel hopeless and often we say, I'm not worth it. This is what I am. And it's a lie. Why do we get so mad at people that lie to us? But when we lie to ourselves, we're not quite as outraged.
Yeah, because we believe it.
I am that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. And we've said it so often. Great shot. We're worth it. And thank you again for the time today. We've gone a little bit over. People already say, bring Forrest, come back, Forrest, come back. That'll happen. And look forward to our next visit, Forrest. to know you. Thanks for the work that you're doing.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.